Welcome to the Trust Leader Podcast. I'm very excited to have Dov Baron with us today. Dov is a leader in the space of leadership development. He's got a very interesting past, which I'll make sure he tells us a little bit about today. And one of the topics Dov is really pushing to the forefront is how do you really create these cultures of belonging? How do you create cultures where leaders engender an environment where people are, I'm going to plug the title of your book, Fiercely Loyal. The title of the book is Fiercely Loyal, how high-performing teams or how high-performing companies develop and retain top talent. So thanks for joining us, Dov. And
My pleasure.
I'd like just to hear you start with where you see leaders getting challenged and what are some of the things they need to be keeping in mind, especially as we come out of COVID and really start to deal with a lot of challenges that, say, leaders and so didn't deal with 20 years ago.
Where are leaders challenged? The answer to that is everywhere. I mean, it's phenomenal the amount of challenges that leaders are facing. I mean, think about it. We've got more technology than we've ever had, and things should be easier. But when I'm speaking at a large event with 5 or 10,000 people, and I ask, is leadership easier or harder today? The answer is always harder. So if we've got all these things that are supposed to make it easier, we've got cell phones, we've got laptops, we've got computers, we've got 50,000 apps. Why isn't it easier? Because the apps have all done one thing. They've moved us forward in technology, but they've lacked us behind in the humanities. And you and I both know this because it's the center of our work, Sean, is that if we don't focus on the humanity, we're going to get stuck. And so where leaders are most challenged is they feel the pressure, they feel the urgency of staying up to date on technology. And as a result, they're falling behind in humanity. And that's where they get stuck.
Yep. You and I have a strong humanities background. This is pretty normal territory for us. But the fact is leaders are they're just as frazzled, dealing with as many challenges as everybody else, and then some. How do you get somebody to start that process? When you say focus on the humanities, that could even be vague and overwhelming.
Of course.
What's a good starting point?
Find out about the person who works closest to you at a personal level. That's the simple starting point. Watch what happens to that and pay attention to what happens to them when you have a conversation with them that is not business. Watch what happens. And by that, don't listen with the intent to respond. Listen with the intent to hear and just watch their eyes. Watch what happens. And you'll see that often they'll seem uncomfortable. That's not because they're uncomfortable. It's because they don't expect it from you. But if you keep doing it, they will break down that barrier. And you will begin to see that people will not only be better productively, they'll be better emotionally. Their morale will be up. They'll feel better in how they're coming together, and they'll want to interact with others. So, if we look at the huge challenge we're facing today, and I'll just bring it back to what you talked about, which was COVID. COVID isolated us all. Human beings are not meant to be isolated. We are tribal. You know this. We are very tribal beings. We need community. And so we've come back to work, sort of. We've come back to work. It's 3, almost 4 years later. And as we come back to work, we're looking for community. And at the same time, a lot of people saying, I don't want to come back to work. I realize I don't have to be in the office. So how do you create that community if your people are not in the office? And if when they're in the office, they feel pressured because they're only there 2 or 3 days a week.
Yep.
If you don't make your environment a place where people feel like they belong, you're dead in the water, because the simplicity of it is this. If I don't belong, I'm fitting in. And if I'm fitting in, you're not going to get my best. I'm just there for a paycheck.
Yep. Now that brings up the topic of cynicism here, both on the leader side and on the employee side, because look, a lot of people don't want to be doing the commute. They like the autonomy of working from home, and yet leaders and employees themselves may not recognize the impact of being separate for those periods of time. When you want to start to create community, when you want to start to foster that environment that would naturally start to create collaboration and sense of connection and belonging, how do you overcome those initial cynicisms so people aren't just rolling their eyes and, you know, all that stuff? How do you start that process?
The first thing you got to do is stop doing what everybody else is doing. So what I mean by that is nobody gives a shit about the cappuccino machine or the bean bags or the foosball machine. All that is just nonsense. It was great in the late 90s, early 2000s for Google, but even Google don't do it anymore. It doesn't matter. It's not what you think it is. So you're externally focused. This is the challenge. You and I both know this, Sean. You're externally focused. You're looking at what's the solution out there. There is no solution out there. The solution is in here. And in here is me as the human being and me as the organization. What are we going to do to make this unique? So I'll give you a simple example. We were brought in to work with a company. It was a national property development. They built skyscrapers and all those kinds of things. And they were in 5 or 6 other industries, multi-billion-dollar organization. And we're brought in to work with them. And I was brought in by the CEO, but the founder was his dad. It was a multi-generational family business. And the dad's like bitching at me. People are not loyal anymore. They don't want to stick around. This is pre-COVID. They don't want to stick around. You know, like they're just entitled, blah, blah, blah. We're so good to them. And I said, okay, yeah, and I'm listening. Fine. You know, okay. I have to take you at your word. But I said, here's what I want to do. I just want you to walk me through the place, the main office. Okay. So he walked me through. I said, what's this area here? And there was this nice curved couch, and there was a couple of bean bags and espresso machine and some other things, you know. And I said, what's this? And they said, oh, this is the social area. I said, oh, good. He goes, what a bloody waste of time. Why? Nobody uses it. Okay. So what do you have here? Well, we have the cappuccino machine. We have these, we have that. Well, okay. Even at a pinball machine. Okay, cool. Nobody uses it. Really? Yeah. You know, people are just entitled. No, hold on a second. I want to ask you one simple question. He goes, what's that? Who did you ask? Did you do any kind of, even a simple survey of what you'd like in this sort of casual area? Nope. We read all the books. We knew what to do. Okay. So you just figured this was the right stuff to do without actually consulting with your people as opposed to with some idea. Yes. Okay. Fair enough. Now, let me ask you another question. How often do you use it? Well, I don't come in here. So this is not a community space. And what you're actually sending a message of this is we don't give a shit about you. We're just following what we think is the right trend and hoping you'll use it. And what's more, if you use it, you will be punished because we don't use it. So it clearly isn't okay.
Yes.
You're not leading by example. That's where you start in being, when we talk about leadership from a humanity place, a human-centric organization is centered on humanity. And so, simple thing, I tell every leader, I want you to understand something. I don't care if you have kids or grandkids or you have none. You're a parent. You go, what do you mean? At work as a leader, you're a parent. What do you mean? If you smoke and you tell your 5-year-old don't smoke, what do you think is going to happen to them? They're going to smoke because people learn by example, and we're all kids in big bodies. So if you don't go in the lounge area, nobody's going in the lounge area. They figure that you're going to spy on them if they're in there, and they're going to get punished and seen as being lazy. Oh, we never thought about that. Yeah, of course you don't.
Or so even worse, if they think you're an asshole, you're going to be sitting there alone and they're not going to come to you because you actually aren't related to your people and they know it.
Exactly. So, you know, but I help my people out. Yeah. Okay, fine. So can you tell me this person's name? No. Do you know her husband's name? No. Do you know her wife's name? No. Do you know their kids' names? No. Do you know what was their biggest struggle in the last 3 months, 6 months, year? No. Why not? Well, I haven't got time for that. I'm running a bloody enterprise here. Okay. Well, if you don't have time for that, you will be running the enterprise on your own at some point, because everybody is going to walk away, and you're going to keep complaining about people not being loyal, and your churn rate is going to be massive when in fact you're spending 1.5 to 2 times the annual salary of that individual to replace them. That's a problem.
And that has become so common that people don't know they could break that cycle. But like you're pointing to, this would have to be a complete shift in outlook. And I think what you and I have talked about is we have this generational shift as well, kind of the second wave to third wave thinking, where look, a lot of leaders now were raised, if they have an MBA, they went to MBA programs that taught them top-down management.
Yep.
Extensions of our World War II success, so very command and control. That switched to this new form of leadership. Look, that's a huge paradigm shift. So what do people have to grapple with when we go from command and control to how to be a servant leader, a co-creative leader where people are engaged? It's a huge chasm for a lot of people.
It's a huge chasm, and in fairness, one that many will never get over.
Yeah.
I want to be clear. I mean, I'm not going to butter it up. Many people will never get over it. In the words of Niels Bohr, sometimes you have to wait for the old guard to die before the new ideas can be accepted. Niels Bohr is a quantum physicist, for those who don't know. So oftentimes that's how it is. You have to wait for the old guard to die. The challenge is not that. The challenge is that the old guard have trained the new guard.
Exactly.
So, it's one of the things I wrote about recently in an article I posted on LinkedIn, which is we all hear about vulnerability and the importance of vulnerability and not being command and control. And if you're in a lower position, yeah, that would be great. That would be great. But in order to climb the corporate ladder, you have to play the game.
Right.
So that by the time you've got to the top of the corporate ladder, you've got no vulnerability left. So you've learned actually to suppress the very thing you were fighting for. That's the challenge. So the challenge is this, that the average leader is a leader in a leadership position, is a leader between 10 and 12 years before they get any leadership training. Just pause for a minute as you listen to this and take that in. So it's very much Peter principle. We're gonna raise you to the level of your incompetence because you were good in this area, and then we're gonna put you in charge of other people. You got no people skills. You were just good at the thing. So you're going to teach other people to be good at the thing without any people skills. So the challenge is that it's organizational. Is why are we not training our people to be leaders when they're not leaders? And the answer is, I wrote about it in Fiercely Loyal, is, well, we're afraid they're gonna jump ship and go somewhere else. Here's the deal. They're gonna go somewhere else. But if you've done that, you see, the thing about millennials and Gen Z is they are very hungry to learn. Yep. So you think that they're entitled and they want to move up the ladder quickly. No, they just not willing to have a 40-year career. A career is 4 years. They want to learn. They want to grow. They want to expand into different areas to find more of ways that they can expand and express themselves. That's what a culture of belonging is. It gives people places to expand. If you train them in this way, it doesn't mean they're going to stay with you. It means they will stay with you longer, certainly, because the average, as I said, the average career is 4 years, but the average tenure is less than 2, right? So people are gone within 2 years. But if you do what I'm suggesting, what happens is they go back into the talent pool and they tell the talent pool where to go. So you're getting top class people constantly coming through your system. And yes, you'd like to keep them longer, and you will keep them longer than most people will, but you're always getting top quality. You're getting the cream of the crop because people are going, oh, you gotta go work for Sean. He is awesome. He really gives a shit about us. He cared about us. And I went in there to do this and I ended up doing that because I wanted to expand. And I was able to go to him and say, listen, I'm really interested in this. Is there any room for me to do that? And Sean said, yeah, we're going to give you 5 hours a week to go play in that area and see if maybe it's a fit for you. Maybe it isn't, but it'll still be a working job, but you'll be kind of in a mentored position. Oh, that would be great. You got to go work for Sean. I left that not because I loved it there. And well, I know you got an offer to work somewhere else for more money, but you know what? You're not going to get this. Millennials are leaving jobs that pay better to go to a place where they belong. Please get that if you're a leader. You think throwing money at them will solve the problem. It will attract them, but not for long. They won't stick around.
Well, there's a piece in there that I think is hard to convey, but so fundamental, which is even the way we talk about the term vulnerability. It gets used as I got to be vulnerable so I can get some more results out of my people, versus a leader saying, I, as a leader, feel like I always have to know the answer in order for you to respect me. I'm actually seeing that I need to say that I don't know, and let's put our heads together and look at how we can. That is a radical shift for most old school leaders who have been raised in that culture you just described. So I wonder what kind of challenges you run into to get people to just be authentically vulnerable enough so that they can begin having a co-creative interactions with their people. What are those hurdles? What do they actually have to confront?
Well, you and I have talked about this off air. There's this challenge with these generalized, ubiquitously thrown around terms like vulnerable or authentic. They're bullshit terms.
Yeah.
Because they lose their meaning. So is vulnerability important? Yes. Okay. So the leader who's, a command and control leader says to me, I'm not bloody talking about what's going on with my kids and all the rest of it. And I'm like, did I say you have to do that?
Right.
Well, isn't that what vulnerability is all about? Ultimately, yes, but initially, absolutely not. And they go, well, I don't understand. Well, vulnerability is exactly what Sean just said, saying, do I have to have all the answers? Because I feel like the anxiety, I feel sometimes pressured to have the answers when I really would rather ask you for your input. It doesn't mean that we'll do exactly what you say, but it does mean I will value your input, and maybe collaboratively we can come up with a better solution than I can. That's vulnerability. And so I think that part of the challenge is that it's made very big. It's made very raw, and it's not. So if you want a clue on how to do it, I'm going to tell you exactly how to do it. This is a very simple strategy I teach leaders all the time. The simple strategy is this: be vulnerable about something that is work related, like Sean just said. I have my own ideas about this. Command and control isn't going to say, I don't know. Going to say, I have my own ideas about this. You can soften your own ego with that. I have my own ideas about this, but I want to be more open to collaborating and understanding what you think. I can't guarantee I'm going to do it, but I need to be open-minded enough to the possibility that there's a better collaboration, a better idea than just mine. That's a step in the right direction. It's not there, but it's a step in the right direction. And the more you do it, the more comfortable you'll be with it, and the more comfortable they will be. Now, if you're a command and control freak, I work with them all the time. That's going to feel like a 1,000-yard run.
Right.
But it's not, and you can get used to it, because I want you to understand something. If you're looking at me, or you're looking at Sean, or you're looking at some other leader who is very vulnerable with the people they lead, you might go, well, I'll never be like that. I'm just not that kind of guy. Listen, pause for a minute. I want you to grasp something. Courage is subjective. What's easy for you might be incredibly hard for me, and just elicit enormous amounts of courage for me to do it. And what's easy for me might be incredibly courageous for you. Don't measure yourself by anybody else. If it feels uncomfortable, that's good. If it feels terrifying, pull it back a bit. It's just got to be a little bit uncomfortable. That's how you grow. There is no growth in comfort. Comfort will suffocate you to death. So you've got to get a little bit uncomfortable. You've grown your company by being uncomfortable. So that's what you have to do. So it's just stepping in a little bit. And like I said, just framing it in this context of, I just want to be a little bit more open. I have my own ideas. And I realize that I've always run on my own ideas. And I realize that you might even be cautious about telling me, because my ideas are pretty pronounced and sort of, this is the way it is. But I'm going to be honest with you. I know I need to change that. And if it's just one grain of sand in the mix and you don't feel like I'm listening to you, you get permission to say that to me. Are you listening, Sean? Are you listening, Dov? Are you listening, Fred? Are you listening, Susan? Are you listening, Betty? Whatever it is. And I just want to share this one point. Because here's the thing, like children, it's these little seeds that we plant that open it up. The next step in vulnerability is this, just to give you the specific steps, is understand something called reciprocal vulnerability. Most of you think that vulnerability is about going in and emotionally vomiting on your people. That is not vulnerability. That is emotional vomit. Nobody wants that. I don't want that from my wife. She doesn't want it from me. And there's nobody I'm closer to in my entire life. I don't want her emotional vomit. She doesn't want mine. So your people certainly don't want it. Reciprocal vulnerability means you pay attention to where somebody's being somewhat vulnerable with you, and you measure what would be equal to that from me. You make it reciprocal. And as a leader, I'm challenging you because leaders must go first. So you deliver a little bit of vulnerability. I'm really struggling to understand where you're coming from on this, Sean. And I don't want to make you wrong, but I just want to understand, and I'm not getting it. Now, it might be me. Maybe I'm a bit thick, and maybe I've just got filters on that are not allowing me to hear it. That's vulnerability. And then the person goes, oh, okay. You opened up
to be
a
a
little
human
bit
for a second here. I could actually talk to this guy.
Right. So they will come forward. And then you can build on that over time, because that's what trust is. Trust is reciprocal vulnerability. Write that down, tattoo that on your brain, underline it, write it backwards on your mirror so you can read it. Trust is reciprocal vulnerability. If you don't believe me, I'll give you a simple example. Think of somebody you've known for 5 to 10 years, pick a time, whatever it is, that is your true loyal best friend. You could trust them through anything. Now think of somebody else you've known for the exact amount of time, same, very similar, who is just an acquaintance. What's the difference? It's not time. I just took that away. It's reciprocal vulnerability. The person you trust is the person who knows your shit. You know theirs, but you're not willing to use it against each other. And the person who is an acquaintance has either tried to have vulnerability with you and you've rebuffed it, or you've tried to have vulnerability with them and they've rebuffed it. And so it's kept it at a surface level. That's all it is. That's all it is. Then you can trust that person. If there's no vulnerability, it's very difficult to trust anybody.
You made a mention of this. I'd love to highlight it, that when we're in organizations, there is just inherently a set of agreements, a way that a culture just comes to be. A new person comes in, you kind of figure out how people act here, what's appropriate. And a lot of times it does not lend itself to being connected, being open, showing any imperfection. And that translates into a willingness to not venture new ideas, challenge status quo, say, hey, I think I might see an issue here. So when a leader begins, so we work with these leaders and they want to start making a change. One of the pieces that you slid in there was you have to acknowledge how it has been and say, hey, I'm actually getting something for myself over here. I've been learning some stuff and I'd like to actually make a new agreement about how we operate. Because it can be really daunting for a leader to suddenly get something. And when they start changing how they act without giving people a heads up, it's really freaking weird. So you kind of have to actually share that, and then inside of that actually be vulnerable, like, hey, maybe I'm not the best leader ever. I'm learning how to do some new things, and maybe I'd like to change how we operate between us so people have a little context for how we can start to move forward.
That's such an important point, Sean, is that sometimes the vulnerability is in just saying, I'm learning.
Yeah.
I'm learning, I'm discovering. Right. And that sometimes is the opening vulnerability, because otherwise, like, I know, because I went into a company I was working with, and I was working with the executive team, and I pulled away one of the guys. His name was Jack, and he, director of operations at a massive level. And I said, how was today? We did this 1 day training. And he goes, it was great. It was really great. He goes, everything you had to say was really valuable and I got it. He goes, but I said, what? And he goes, we're not going to do it. And I go, what do you mean you're not going to do it? I go, I'm not cheap. It's not, there's a couple of dollars across the table here.
Yeah.
Why are you not doing it? He goes, because it's flavor of the month. And I go, what do you mean? He goes, there'll be a new consultant here in the next month or the next quarter, and they'll say something else, and we'll be off on that tangent for 3 to 6 weeks, and then it'll fade away. And nobody. That's the challenge.
Yeah,
is the willingness to integrate, and the best way to integrate is to go out, and this as well as I do. Go out and admit where I just learned this, and I'm challenged to take it on. Can you help me? Well, I'm just the receptionist and you're the COO. Mm-hmm. And nobody better to teach me. Well, I'm the janitor. Yep. Nobody better to teach me. Go not one level down. You must go multiple levels down.
That's a level of humility that is uncommon, though, to actually get in there with your people. But that's when we talk about creating innovative, resilient cultures. People, in my experience, want to be engaged in meaningful work that utilizes the best of their skills and abilities. And there's this switch that you and I talk about, like when you put problems over there for people to solve and give them the tools to explore, collaborate, even screw up and learn from their mistakes and iterate, there is a kind of personal growth and development in there. But if the leader doesn't demonstrate themselves being that kind of person, you'll never be that kind of company. So it really does require the leader to embrace the idea that by admitting maybe I don't know and there's a different way to do things, and say, hey, I'm willing to get in here and we might make some mistakes, but you have my word. I'm going to hang in there with you. It takes a special kind of courage to be willing to take that leap.
It does. And that's why so again, we're back to this command and control mentality, because command and control mentality is also a lone wolf mentality. It has this idea of the self-made human being. There's no such thing. It's bullshit. There's no such thing. So you're not self-made. You may have come from nothing and made amazing things, but along the way, there were people who assisted you, sometimes in just sharing their wisdom with you, or maybe financially backing you, but there was somebody who assisted you. And it's that lone wolf mentality of the self-made individual that stops us and gets in the way. Because here's what you need to understand. You and I know a lot about family dynamic psychology. So in family dynamic psychology, the simplicity of it is this: normal isn't healthy. Normal is just whatever you grew up with.
Right.
So just underline that in your mind for a moment as you listen. Normal isn't healthy. Normal is just whatever you grew up with. So the culture of your organization is a family. Whatever you've normalized is just that. It's normalized. Yep. So when I go into a company, I'll say, okay, so tell me about your corporate culture. And they'll often hand me a document. And I go, okay, so what's this? And they go, well, this is our corporate culture. And I go, this is not. This is a piece of paper. And they go, no. It outlines what it is. I go, I guarantee you this is not your corporate culture. And I've not even read the document. And they go, how can you possibly say that? Because
you hand it to me on paper.
Wake up every morning and read this freaking document. The answer is none. In fact, if I asked you to tell me 5 things on this list of 14 things, you could probably tell me 2. So it's not your corporate culture. This is your preferred corporate culture. I give you that. But your subculture is your corporate culture.
Yeah.
Your subculture is what is allowed, what is normalized inside of the environment. And you, as the leader, are the best example. So not so much these days about arriving at certain times and leaving at certain times, but back in the day when, people had to be at work at 8:30 and left at 5, and you stroll in at 9:15, the message is very clear. Climb the corporate ladder. You can do whatever the hell you like.
Yeah.
That's the message. It's not the corporate culture. The message is, this is for peons, you have to be here at a certain time and you can only leave at a certain time. But once you start doing this, because one of the most, and this is, again, something I constantly battle up against, is one of the worst things you can do for your corporate culture is reward a toxic person who is a high producer. Do you get that?
Bingo.
Like, stop for a minute and think about who is a high producer inside of your organization who is completely toxic to your culture, and you keep rewarding them. What are you telling everybody who works there? You can be as toxic as you like as long as you make me money. Well, if that's what you want, that's okay if it's 1950. But you are dead in the water in the 2020s. You are dead in the water. You're going to be gone. And you go, well, we were established. We're multi-generational. Hey, I work in multi-generational families. And I can tell you that by the third and fourth generation, often they're gone. They're destroyed. Why? Because they keep trying to do things the way they were. Well, it's how we do things around here. Yeah, well, bye-bye. You are a dinosaur.
The world is changing.
Yeah. And if you're not going with it, you're dead in the water.
Well, you and I are also in a position where we hear what people tell us behind the scenes. And one of these, again, I think one of the things we're trying to do in this conversation is break up this notion that to be this kind of leader means that everything is going to be kumbaya and we're all got to be hugging it. It's not that at all.
No.
But you and I also hear a lot of stories about when somebody checked out, they weren't getting critical needs being met. Like how many women I know who have suffered harassment in the workplace, and after months of making complaints, they finally got that nobody's going to deal with this and there are going to be no repercussions. And that person might have been the person who held more relationships together and brought more value to the table and been your best liaison to some of your critical clients and customers. But they checked out and said, I'm going to start looking for a new job. And it might have been a year before they even left, but they checked out already. And the loss of value that they brought would never make it into a P&L statement. But it is a failure on the part of the leadership and a failure to see where your value in the organization is coming from. And I wonder, how do you communicate that kind of value to leaders and to make this case to take another look at this approach?
Well, you just said it. We're looking at P&L and it's hard figures. And so we've got to use some of those hard figures, i.e., as I mentioned, 1.5 to 2 times the annual salary of an individual to replace them. That's just to do the job.
Right.
So just to get that, that's just to do the job. That's not the added things they bring. So this lady, as an example you just talked about, as a potential person, even though it may be a mythical individual.
Kind of a composite of,
yeah, of course, right? You never considered the amount of value she's bringing that is beyond the things she does in a daily job to check the boxes and say, oh, I fulfilled all these things. But that conversation that she has with that other person in the office who is feeling downhearted about something else that's going on in their life, and she brings that person up so that person produces more for you, now that's gone. So now that person who was going through a struggle has got no one to lean on, no one to support them. Their production went down 20%, right? And so that's just one example. And then that person who has walked away also used to deal with your suppliers or your supply chain. And that, they're not having those conversations anymore. So when they phone and say, hey, is Betty there? No, Betty's not here anymore. Oh.
Big alarm bell.
So now I got to start a fresh relationship with somebody else. Betty knows what we need.
Definitely not going to be like Betty.
No. And so we all have those experiences, right? We're all a bit shy about a new relationship, particularly when we built trust and vulnerability with somebody inside of an organization. It's like getting a new doctor, right? It's like, my doctor just retired. He's been my doctor for 30 years. Right. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure I want any other doctor holding my testicles and saying cough. Right. And it feels like
and
that.
You don't want to audition them either.
Right. No, exactly. Right. So it feels like that in business. It's like my doctor holding my testicles and saying cough is a progression of 30 years. But now I got to start with a new doctor and start that again. I'm like, yeah, I'll pass on that part. So that doctor doesn't have the information that that doctor needs in order to treat me well. Now think about that in a business context. And I use this analogy and people are like, oh, it's a bit graphic. Hold on. Who's holding your testicles in business? Because that point there, that doctor could crush them or can actually guide me to good health.
Yeah.
I want you to understand that vulnerability isn't what you think it is. Your vulnerability is built on trust. And without having that person, the Betty of the office, who's doing that, who's literally holding the testicles of your business, is suddenly dropping them, and now they're swinging in the wind and are ready to be kicked if you don't step up and create a whole ton of Bettys and really value Betty. Instead, you keep sending big checks to the asshole who's a big producer. But when I just had a conversation with a leader the other day, and I said, you have to get rid of this person. This is their top producer. You have to get rid of this person. He goes, I can't do it. And I go, here's what I want you to understand. Because I've been around them all. I've been in, because I do executive trainings and I've been in the room with them. And I said, here's what I want you to understand, what you don't know that I know, because I'm on the outside. Everybody else on the team, their production will go up by 5 to 25% if you let this person go.
Now do the math.
So this will make up beyond anything you can imagine. Now, will there be a slump initially? Of course, yes, because people are finding their feet. But once that person is gone, watch over time, 3 months max, you'll see everybody's production will go up because this toxicity is removed. You think that they don't notice? Of course they notice. Your high-producing toxic person is lowering everybody else's production. That's why they look so like a superstar. But what if everybody on the team was a 10% more of a superstar? Just 10%. And you didn't have that person. Well, suddenly you're way more in profit. Suddenly you're way better off. This is what you got to understand about being a human-centric business. It's more profitable. It's not just about doing the right thing. It actually is the right thing, but it's the right thing for profit too.
That's, I think, the critical piece. And you and I've talked about this a little bit, and it's worth taking a little historical perspective on this, that our modern corporate design is only a recent phenomenon that came out of our success in World War II. You know, we deploy all these resources abroad. Oh my God, logistically, what we pulled off was quite phenomenal at the time. And then, you know, generals and colonels and stuff were installed into manufacturing facilities. And that kind of gave rise to our modern MBAs and all of that. Now, that gave rise
to corporate structure.
Yeah. So we have to think of the last 3 or 4, maybe 5 or 6 generations, the last 100 years, as actually being a wildly distorted aberration from the rest of human history. That what we think is good business actually, and I'm just going to say it, is oftentimes a demonstration of sociopathic behavior that has put markets ahead of humans and all that. And now we're starting to see that it's not sustaining itself. And I find that if we go back to, well, how did a tribe exist? Exactly. A tribal elder who had sway and power was not from accumulating wealth. They're hunter-gatherer. They actually had to do it by being the kind of person that others aspired to be, that led with credibility. So I find that that's just this macro blind spot, since we have people going through schools and MBA programs and following talent funnels into companies that show you that this is how you have to be. But we kind of have to really zoom out to see that we might be in a period of distortion on the level of perhaps 80 to 100 years. And like you said, it's not just doing what's right to make profit, but it's actually just doing what's right for people. And it's, to me, it's a really shift of focus about where a leader's looking. We just made up Betty here as a composite person. Where is the source of your value? And I feel like that's one of these challenges I know that I grapple with, is trying to make that case and not coming off sounding like I'm proselytizing.
Well, you are proselytizing. I mean, you're proselytizing for something that matters. And so was Martin Luther King. Right? So was Gandhi. So was Nelson Mandela. So was anybody who's made a difference in the world has had to proselytize for something that is going to get enormous amounts of pushback.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not willing to do that, get out of the business. That's okay. Like I'm telling you, get out of the business. Because I'll tell you that I could do what I do way more profitable if I shut the hell up.
Right.
I can give you all the strategies. I know all the strategies. I can give you all the strategies and I'd be way more profitable. But I'm going to prophesize for humanity, for you being a more human leader, because I have not only a shit ton of experience, but I have enough foresight to see you're dead in the water if you don't do this. Because, you know, this, as you said, this whole system is designed around the industrial complex, the industrial revolution, the industrial complex, and the military. That system, well, we're already replacing things with robots, right? You know, everything you used to write by hand, you don't, most people can't write. Like, look at people's handwriting today. It's horrendous. Like, I remember going to school and being told how to write, making sure my letters were correct.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody cares anymore because everything's done on a keyboard. Now, we understand that those progressions have taken place, but we don't understand that the people we employ are more empowered than they've ever been. We don't get that. We want you to go to work and do your job like you're on the production line.
Yeah, like there's like a soft cog in the machine.
Right? That's not what it is anymore. So in the war with talent, talent won. It's already over. Now people went, oh, well, you know, so then we had COVID and then we had the great resignation, right? And so quiet quitting. Well, what do those things mean? Well, great resignation. I wrote a lot about it. I think you and I have talked about this, that I wrote a piece around that it wasn't the great resignation. It was the great reevaluation. People reevaluated why they were doing what they were doing and realized, I don't give a shit about some of the things I thought I did. It doesn't matter. And so they resigned, or they were in a position to resign in some way. And again, this was global. It wasn't just the US. It was in China. It was in Vietnam. Now, you know what you don't know about Vietnam? Vietnam is a communist country. It's a communist country, right? They did it there too. People just went, screw it, I'm going back to the farm. I'm just going to go back to the farm.
Yeah.
Are we going to be poorer? Yes. But, you know, the things I was working for, I don't care about. So we had the great resignation. People reevaluated what happened. Then you had quiet quitting, which is really talking about disengagement. Right. Which was already
more of this. Yeah. Just 2.0.
Yeah. 2.0. It was a horrendous level anyway. So people look, okay. So now you're at a place where you go, oh, there's a potential recession, blah, blah, blah. And people are drifting back to work. Yeah, but they're not coming back the same. They might take the job, but you are never going to get the best out of them. You're never going to even get more than 60% out of them because they're emotionally disengaged. When you talk about engagement, people talk about engagement all the time. It's in, you know, every research study on engagement, the hundreds of billions of dollars spent on it. And I ask people all the time, what does engagement mean? It's one of those ubiquitous terms that's thrown around.
Yep.
What does it mean? And they go, well, you know, blah, 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 blah. Now, let me just tell you what it means. It means I emotionally give a shit. That's the simplicity of it.
Yep.
Do I emotionally give a shit about this job, this company, or these people? If I don't, I'm out. Because here's the thing, millennials want to have a best friend at work. They're not looking for work-life balance. Us boomers think that that's what they want. That's not what they want. They don't want work-life balance. They want work-life blend. They want a place where their friends are, that they can go and have a coffee in the lounge with them and have a 20-minute chat with their mate and then go back to work feeling engaged again. Like, I'm
By the way,
excited to go
maybe
back to
come up
this
with a
project.
great idea and actually hash it out and know that that's actually the way that good ideas pop up.
Yeah. So I was talking to you about my kid struggling with this thing and that thing, and you said this, and it's like, oh my God, that's exactly what I need to do with this project. Never thought about that. Thank you. And off you go and you do the thing. Now, is that happening every time? Of course not. But it's happening way more than you think.
Well, that's what you're really getting to, kind of the big elephant in the room, which we're seeing this convergence where the external factors going on in life and all the poly crisis and all that other stuff is bleeding over into the workspace. And again, to the point you made at the beginning of the conversation, the leader could take that as just another challenge. Mm-hmm. It could be another thing coming at them that they shouldn't have to deal with. Now, what we're really talking about is a crisis of meaning.
That's exactly what it
in
is.
Life. And I think one of the more important points maybe that we could talk about for leaders is, how do we change the context for them from thinking that this is yet another massive challenge that I have to now give them meaning in their life, to no. There is actually a way to construct and cultivate an environment where people are able to derive meaning from their work that is going to give you superlative outcomes. Paint a little picture of that for us, because I think that that's a real tough mental gap to bridge here.
Yeah. Well, as you know, one of my bylines is that the person who controls the meaning controls the movement.
Yeah.
So, simple analogy, just for people to have context, is if you look at January the 6th, you know exactly what year I'm talking about. And you see all these people doing all these crazy things, and you think, what a bunch of crazy people. And is it true that there were crazy people there? Absolutely. But there's crazy people in your church and in your supermarket. They're everywhere. But the majority of people were not crazy. The majority of people were given a meaning, and that meaning moved that tribe. That's what happens in tribes.
Yep.
The meaning determines the movement of the tribe. And as a result, there are a lot of I would say that there are people who are in jail who should not be there, because they followed meaning that somebody else gave them. And there are a lot of people who were manipulating that meaning, who are still living in nice houses and driving nice cars and eating nice dinners. So meaning controls movement. So if you don't create an opportunity for people to create meaning that matters to them, they won't stick around. So let's just go to understanding that within ourselves. So the first question I would ask a leader is a values question. What matters most to you? Right? So they say, oh, well, a common answer is family.
Yep.
Right? And I go, okay. So if that's true, I'm not saying it isn't, if that's true, show me your calendar. And I go, okay, I don't see family anywhere on here. Well, no. If it is the highest possible value, then it takes up a huge chunk of your time. That's the reality. You say it's family, and what it actually is it's an aspirational value. It's not a value.
Right.
Aspirational values are very different than values. So it's an you want it to be. I'm not saying you're lying. You want it to be, but when it all comes down to all, and you've got your kids' recital for flute, or you've got an emergency meeting with the board is going to get your attention. Tell me I'm wrong. And they go, you're right. Okay. So it's not your highest value. It doesn't matter that much to you. So you have derived meaning that's pulling you into the board meeting versus the recital. What is that meaning? And then they go, oh, geez, never thought about that. Well, what if you did that with your people? What if you asked them, what is it that gives your life meaning? So I want to explain this in a distinction, because, again, I think that oftentimes things are sort of thrown around and not really, there's no distinction. So I talked about values there, and aspirational values versus real values. So there's a great deal of difference between aspirational values and meaning. I'll give you an example. If you're a ticklish person and I come and tickle you, are you happy? The answer is yes. If I stop tickling you, are you happy? No. What happened? It's an external force. It's transitory. It's moving through you. But if I ask you about your joy, what brings you joy, that's something going on inside of you. It's not external. When I think about spending time with my youngest grandchildren, and I think about my granddaughter, who is almost 3 years old, standing in the bathroom while I was putting on some face cream, and she looks at me and she goes, "You're so pretty, G-Dad." I'm G-Dad. It's not Granddad, it's G-Dad. Right? You're so pretty, Granddad. I'm like, and I look at her and go, yeah, that's what I was going for. Thank you. Like, that's joy.
Yeah.
Even sharing that with you is joy, but it's not happening in the moment. It's joy. So meaning is something that is innate, but we don't get to it. So we get to a superficial meaning, i.e., given to us by a political leader or a company leader, and we can get on that bandwagon for a while because we're so desperate. Because, as you said, there is an urgency of meaning. And the challenge we live is that we're living in a society where meaning is being thrown at us every single day, constantly. CNN says this is what matters. Fox says this is what matters. Social media says this is what matters. Instagram says what matters is the right filter. What matters is that you've got 10,000 followers, 100,000, 1 million followers. What matters is that 1,000 people, 1 million people watched your video. It's all externalized meaning. Yeah. And we're bombarded with it. And you go, well, I don't go on social media. I'm not of that ilk. What's your version of it?
We swim in
it. Is your version of it that you bought a new Mercedes or a new Rolls Royce? Is your version of it a yacht? My clients, it's, their version of social media is a yacht. They don't need to show it off to everybody in the world. They just want their people to see that they got a yacht. Right? It's the same shit. What's the internal meaning? Because those people come to me and they say, Dov, I've got all this. I could buy another house. I could buy another yacht. I could buy another plane. Why is something missing? Meaning. So there's a crisis of meaning. And part of the reason for the crisis of meaning is because we're being bombarded with false meaning. Yep. So you have to stop and find out for yourself what really matters when everything else goes away. Now, we all know the 5 most regretted things in the world for people. Okay. Yeah, we know that. And we all know what we think we should do, but we're not doing it. So the question is why? And the answer, very simply, is external focus. You're focused on something outside of yourself to give you a set of applause. Why? Because you're a human, and humans need connection. And so if you can't get real connection, you'll go for accolades. You'll go for applause. But if you invested in connection with that person who is the receptionist, or that person who is the salesperson, or that person who is actually sitting next to you as the CMO or the CFO or whatever, as a CEO, and you actually got a connection with them, suddenly that externalized meaning would have a lot less value. A lot less value. I encourage you, if you're on social media, there was a lot of celebrities who did the no makeup challenge. Yeah. And I really liked that. And the reason I liked it was because I don't like it now. I liked it when it was done. And people go, well, what's the difference? Because when it was originally done, it was like, I'm not going for the external applause. I'm going to just show up as me. Now it's people going, I'm going to go for the external applause by showing up without makeup. Yep. So this is the problem. These things get polluted.
Yep.
Like the term vulnerability, like the term authenticity, as opposed to, and here's the word again, belonging. Where do you belong? That's the question I want to ask you as you listen. Where do you belong? Not where do you fit in? Because to fit in, you must distort. Right. Where do you belong with all the warts and all the genius? Where can you talk about the things you can't talk about with anybody else? Yeah. Where can you dive into the realms that are politically incorrect and still be held as a decent human being? Where can you have conversations about what you dearly love, even though people don't get it?
Yeah. Or what you're dealing with that might not be as pretty.
Yeah, what you're dealing with that's not as pretty, not as Instagram-able. It's like, what is the struggle? Like, the people I have to work with, it takes enormous amounts of trust for them because they don't feel like there's anybody they can trust anymore. These are people who this is why you hear these things about these entourages of celebrities. You look at it and you think, what a bunch of hangers on. Like, you want to judge them all and say, they're living off Charlie's success. Well, they are, but Charlie happily pays for that because Charlie trusts them because they were there in the beginning when there was a struggle. The challenge is that lifestyle will often pollute it.
Right.
And so now, like I say to leaders all the time, you're the CEO. Yes. Who's your most trusted person? Who is the person who's going to tell you the truth? Oh, well, Charlie over here. Great. That's fantastic. How truthful do you think Charlie's going to be? Oh, Charlie will be really great. He'll tell me he's always 100%. No, he's not. What do you mean? No, he's not. No, he's not. Why? Because his lifestyle depends on you. You are going, if he pisses you off, you could cut it. You could cut his kids off from private school. You could change his mortgage. Maybe he can't make the payment on the Mercedes. So it's that level of vulnerability to make people know that you're willing to come in and you're willing to show them warts and all, and that you're willing to do that, to give them a sense of belonging. They will bring you things you've never imagined that are so magnificent, that will grow your company beyond anything you've ever imagined.
So much more valuable than the shallow.
Exactly. More than a simple bottom line, because it is a ripple effect, like we just talked about with Betty. It's a ripple effect. And most of us have been trained to think at a leadership level of it's black, white, zeros and ones, and it's not. It's not. It's a rainbow of shades between the black and white that you've got to pay attention to.
I always go back to this book, Bowling Alone by Robert Putnam, that came out, I think, in the late 90s. And just that one visual of a guy bowling alone. And it talks about, I think it's where the idea of social capital became more popularized.
Right.
And I don't think people appreciate the neurobiochemical relationship between happiness, fulfillment, sense of joy, like you said, that comes from authentic connection. And that you're really talking about highlighting and doing battle with all of these externalities that we have been kind of foisted upon us in the last 3 to 4 decades. It's kind of like having to notice that the system that creates so much financial wealth is also the one that keeps telling us we're not enough unless we have these external things. And then we have to kind of deprogram that. But as a leader, your other people will only connect and start to experience that level of collaboration and all of that to the degree to which that leader can deprogram some of this stuff themselves. That's what I really hear you saying.
Yeah. And again, as a leader, remember you're a parent. I can clearly remember my stepfather with a cigarette in his mouth, making a Popeye face because the smoke was coming off his cigarette, telling my 2 younger siblings and me, because we were the 3 eldest, not to smoke. And every kid in my family except me became a chain smoker. I've never smoked in my life, but everybody else became a chain smoker. Right? Well, I can't imagine why. There was nothing modeled. Of course they did. Of course they did. Because again, normal isn't healthy. Normal's just whatever you get used to. And as a leader, you're making people used to this bullshit, and you have to take that stand. Now, you might be listening to this and you're like, well, I've never heard anybody speak like this before in the leadership space. I know. I understand. And as a result, you're going to be on one side or on the other. I get that. My job is not to build a broader fence. My job is to build a narrow fence and push you off in either direction. And I'm okay with either direction because I actually have no judgment on you if you want to go to the other side. Not at all. You can go there. I'm just telling you what I know, what I've experienced, my background in psychology, in neuroscience, in quantum physics, in all the other things that I've studied. Here's what I know. This is my best understanding of what humans do. And if you don't want to pay attention to that, that's okay. I'm not for you. If you don't like direct language, I'm not for you. That's okay. Please understand, it's perfectly fine. And you'll probably survive and you'll probably do okay. But will you be fulfilled? Will you have joy in your life? Or will you have success with spats of happiness? We're all aspiring to happiness. Happiness is bullshit. Happiness is a couple of drinks. Happiness is somebody tickling you. It's transitory. It's the joy. And where does the joy come from? Joy comes from meaning. And you have to find out what really means to you. And often that meaning is in the impact you can have in a positive way. And if you're not sure, and you're not a sociopath, just think about the impact you've had that was bad. Think about how that echoes. I was in the shower this morning thinking of my third youngest grandchild. She's now 13. But when she was 10, I lost my temper. Not with her. I just got pissed off. And I'm not like that. I'm not like that at all. I got pissed off and I said, I've had enough of you being so entitled. Clean up your bloody mess. And she skulked off to the bedroom and sat there sobbing. That echoes. I still have very, very healthy shame about that. Like, that healthy shame reminds me, I do not want to be that man. Well, if I can think about that impact in a negative way, how many people have I impacted in a positive way? By having meaning. Where I sat with them and said, I see you. I see who you really are. I care about you. I love you. I won't work with you if I don't love you. People say, well, how can you love them when you mean? No, I have to know that there's that. I can feel that there's something there I can connect with. If I won't work with you. And people go, really? Yeah, absolutely. Can I write you the check? No. Really? No. If I won't be, and if I feel like I can get there, and we're 3 or 4 months into the work and I don't feel it, I'm going to let you go. And you go, no, it's not working. Because if I don't love you enough to give a shit to fight for your heart and your soul of you as an individual and of your organization, what's the point? So yes, you're not going to hear many leadership consultants talking like that, but my work is not just leadership consultant. It's soulful work in the organization. And if you want a human-centric organization, that could be HR, but HR is really a buffer zone for legal. That's all it really is most of the time. Whereas what I want to do is I want to be the soul. I want to nurture the soul of the organization and the soul of the leaders so that everybody in that organization is enriched. That's what we've got to do. Now, I realize that that's a big order for most leaders. I get that. And they go, oh my God, this guy's a woo-woo. Not at all. Because here's what I know. Retention goes up. Collaboration, creativity goes up. Profit goes up. And morale goes up. Well, okay. How's that for profit? The P&L statement is a different P&L statement now at all kinds of levels, not just on numbers, but on a morale, emotional bonding, connecting, because we've created a tribe of belonging.
And I think you're giving people the permission to actually bring those two worlds together, which have been separated for so long.
Well, I think I'm giving them permission for something that they inherently know is true.
Yeah.
You know this with your work. It's like, I'm not allowed to say that, so I'll fight against it. Well, I'm giving you permission. Right? I'm giving you permission. And I'm gonna be there to help you have that permission so you can give it to yourself. And honestly, a lot of the time that's all we need. Like that shitty student at school just needs somebody to say, I see that you got a lot of talent there. And yeah, you're bouncing off the walls with certain things, but that's because you don't think the way other people do. And so the system's not working for you. Let me help you. And that kid suddenly turns into a freaking superstar.
Yeah.
Well, what if that's you as a leader? You're struggling with all these things. You're just like that kid in the classroom. The system doesn't work for you. And you think, well, it's them. And the system doesn't work for you. But the answer isn't a new system. The answer is a more pure you, a soulfully connected you that allows you to say, I'm abandoning the system. We're not doing it that way anymore. Let's do this. And these leaders then flourish and their organizations flourish. I think that the work of people like you and I is bringing people back to what they inherently know is true.
Yeah. I can't think of a better way to wrap up this conversation. That's it's beautiful. And again, you're a picky man. So people who are interested in this conversation, I think if you made it this far in the conversation, you might be one of those people. Dov, just give people where they can reach you, where,
Sure.
all that, give the whole spiel there.
Thank you, Sean. I appreciate that. So if you want to reach out to me, I'll tell you very simply, I'm here on the planet to serve. So if you want to reach out to me and just have a convo, that's okay. And by the way, I don't do sales. So if you think, oh, he's going to sell me, it's not going to happen. In fact, I'm probably going to try and talk you out of working with me. That's usually what I do. So you can write to me. I know I'm insane, but here's my email address, dov@dovbaron.com, DOV@DOVBARON.com. Write to me. And I want you to write to me. And I want you to tell me what you got out of this conversation. What are you going to do with it? Moreover, I have podcasts. I know what it takes. So I want you to write to Sean. And I want you to tell him what you get out of the show, not just my episode, but out of the show, because this is a one-way bloody street. He spends the time, brings in guests for you, does all this work. You have no idea what it takes. It takes a lot to bring you guests who will bring value to you. So go to wherever you're tuning into the podcast, write a review, tell Sean what you got out of the show, not necessarily this episode, but any episode, and then rate, review, and subscribe to the show and share it with your friends, because we got to get the idea that we're living in an abundant universe. So share the knowledge, share the wisdom, share the kindness, get it out there. So you can write to me, Dov Baron. You can find me, obviously, at dovbaron.com. That's my main website. There's a way to contact me through that. I'm very, very active on LinkedIn. You can find me there as well. I'm also on Instagram and Twitter, all those kinds of places. Actually, if you Google Dov Baron, you'll get more than you could possibly cope with. And I also have a YouTube channel with, I think there's like 1,500 videos on there too. So there's podcasts, there's videos, and there's newsletters. And I'd love for you to subscribe to the newsletter on LinkedIn. It's more polymathic. I go into many different areas of leadership, ranging from geopolitics to economics to psychology. It's an interesting read. So I recommend that you do that.
And you were quite the polymath, and Renaissance man is where I think you get the title. So Dov, thanks so much. This has been such a fantastic conversation. And again, can't wait for the next one.
Thank you so much, Sean. It's been a pleasure and honor. Appreciate it.